Namaskar and welcome to Indian Diplomacy, a show on India's national broadcaster Doordarshan about Indian foreign policy, India's international relations, and key developments in different regions of the world that have a bearing on India's rise. Viewers, in this episode, we are taking a close look at one of the most volatile flashpoints in the world, the region of West Asia or the Middle East, where there have been innumerable wars, conflicts, turmoil, as well as instability for a long time, but they seem to have peaked at the current juncture. There's fighting all over, destruction, and we are not sure what the new order in that region is likely to be, and that will have a direct bearing and implications on India's security and economy. So we are going to try and discuss the fundamental reasons for the turmoil in the Middle East or West Asia, and what other actors are doing about this, and what India's stakes are. And to discuss this, I have with me a domain expert joining me in the studio, Dr. Manjari Singh. Dr. Manjari Singh is a well-known academic and writer and thinker and a specialist on West Asia or the Middle East. She is currently at the Center for Joint Warfare Studies and is the author of a well-received book on India and the Gulf countries. Dr. Singh, welcome to Indian Diplomacy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Chaulia. I am grateful to be invited at Indian Diplomacy. Thank you.
Right. So, you study a region which is almost perpetually mired in crisis, right? So crisis is not new. There have been many cycles over the last, several, almost 100 years now. But as we speak, it looks like the entire order there has collapsed. Yeah. And it looks like something deep is happening, which is like a restructuring or reordering, and this has been very painful, very destructive, and very violent. So if I were to start by asking you for your thoughts on why we are currently in, even by the standards of West Asia or Middle East, why is it burning so much now? And why is there no accommodation among the main players there? Why is there so much enmity and hatred? And why can't we have a cooperative region? Why is it perpetually like this, and especially now, almost always on the edge of the precipice?
If you look at the region, you very rightly pointed out that it is moving towards a reset, it seems like. And the root cause for this is that this is one of the regions which is deeply linked in terms of regional security complexities. But even then, because there are, interconnected complexities, there are transnational conflicts happening, there are sectarian divide, there is intra-ethnic conflicts also that are going on. But despite all these complexities, there is no structured, there is no institutionalized, there is no centralized regional security framework in place. It is a multipolar region. There are many poles, and all of them are contesting with each other for regional prowess. That is the idea. So nobody is at the same page. Everybody is working in silos. So that is one of the reasons why this region has always perpetually been in conflict.
Right. Dr. Singh, that's an interesting point. You said it's a multipolar region there with multiple competing power centers. And I think we can think of at least 5 or 6 big players in that region that always try to push their own interests and power at the expense of the others. It's like a zero-sum logic, as you say. But there's also another factor which has driven a lot of turbulence in the region, which is the regime instability and regime legitimacy in many of these countries. There's hardly a democracy in the region. And of course, there are some stable monarchies like you have in the Gulf countries. But there are a lot of what we call secular authoritarian type of regimes that have collapsed through war and so on, and through civil war in last decade or so, since the Arab Spring. So we saw 2 big wars prior to the wars that started after the October 7, 2023, but even before that, going 10 years, we saw 2 big wars. One was the so-called Syrian civil war, and the other was the Yemeni civil war. And although they were called civil war, there were like a lot of proxy wars going on by outside players trying to push for their pound of flesh, right? So let's talk a bit about those kind of issues which seem like internal regime issues, but will ultimately become regional issues because somebody or the other will intervene on either on the side of the regime or on the side of rebels or guerrillas, and it fuels this cycle.
Right. So basically, before October 7, there has been a fragile calm in the region, a calm which was fragile in nature. So there were not many wars happening. Of course, there was Syrian, Syrian civil war was still going on. The restructuring had not happened. Yemen is still in crisis. Libya also, there are, fault lines. So what happens is that because of like I said, that the regional complexities and because of the regional prowess that is there in the mind of the, regional powers, what they try to do is whenever there is a vacuum in a state, they try to fill in. So Syria, the complexities also increased because of the inclusion of Turkey, inclusion of Iran, inclusion of Russia. So because of these actors, and of course Saudi also, so these actors have further, made the region more and more conflicting. So these are similarly with Yemen also. If you look at Houthis are in one place, then there is a Saudi coalition that is working in place. Similarly for Libya, like the UN recognized government of national unity is favored by Turkey, which is an Islamist regime. But the opposition is favored by the Arab countries and Russia. So because like I said, that whenever there is a vacuum, they try to fill in the gap because they want to display themselves as the regional powers. They want to be in that game of power. So that's the reason.
Yeah, a game of power, viewers, a very interesting formulation by Dr. Manjari Singh. Game of thrones, game of power. This is what is happening in the Middle East or West Asia for a long time. And now it seems like it has reached the tipping point where all the old guardrails have fallen off. And there's like open war going on in so many theaters. Dr. Singh, if we look at the principal players, you mentioned some of them already. Obviously, the Iran-Israel rivalry is a very central one. But there's also the Iran and the Gulf monarchies historically have also had long-running, disputes and contestation.
Right.
So let's talk about this core Iran-Israel. It used to be an undeclared war, then became an open war. Why can't these two coexist? I mean, what is it, the fundamental reason why these two are like sworn enemies and they're willing to go to any length to try and, destroy each other?
Iran at the time of Shah, the regime of Shah, that was the time when Iran was friendlier with Israel. Israel, if you look at it, when it has announced its independence in 1948, it had a core and a periphery. The core that was hostile of the Arab states, constituting of the Arab states, and the periphery of Turkey and Iran. They constituted the periphery, and they had recognized the state of Israel in 1949 and 1950 respectively. So what was the idea was, in terms of Israel's doctrine, was if the core is hostile, the periphery needs to be, friendlier. Similar to what in Arthashastra, the mandala theory also talks about, that the near neighbor is Ari, is going to be, because they are sharing borders with you, so they will be your enemies. But the other countries, the peripheral countries, they will be your friends. They will be your mitra. So similar to this kind of a thing, a concentric circle kind of a theory was propagated by Israelis, wherein they wanted to have this kind of an engagement. Now, eventually, after the Camp David Accords and after the peace process within Israel and Palestine through Oslo Accords, the Arabs kind of normalize their relations. I mean, of course, there are countries which have not formally recognized or normalized relations with Israel, for instance, Saudi Arabia, but others have through the Abraham Accord. So because of the fact that through Camp David Accord, there were already some kind of normalization was happening. So some kind of, an alliance was formed between the Israelis and the Arabs. And even if you look at the states who have not recognized Israel, but under the table clandestine relations exist.
Right.
So this is because Iran is a civilizational power. It is a power which had even contested the Ottoman empires. There was an Ottoman and Safavid rivalry that was going on for a very long time. So because of those things, and because Iran is aerial expansion is huge, it's a geographically very large country, and apart from that, the military, the technological aspects are also very advanced. So in those contexts, it sees itself as the only regional power in the entire Middle East. So because of this alliance, it felt that the Saudi led coalition along with Israel will get more strengthened, and which means that already a minority Shia Iran, it will be sidelined. So because of that, it does not want to have that. So because of which they have repositioned themselves since 1979, and they have been very anti-Israel.
Anti-Israel. Yeah, so you're saying, I mean, there's also the theological element, right? Like there is also a religious justification. They have to, what they call that, the Zionist crusaders and all, we have to fight them. But you're also saying it's also classic realpolitik where an ambitious civilizational power wants its influence, and it wants to shape the region as per its preferences. That's why it's running into a clash with Israel, which is also, very ambitious and not just wants to secure itself, but also wants to shape the order. So there is a clash there, right?
There's a clash along with the fact that here the role of ulema is also very important. How the ulema, which is the religious leader, how they shape the, because they are the actors who legitimize the political system, who legitimize the rulers. So in terms of, if you look at Saudi Arabia, the ulema worked in alliance with the political leaders, the monarchy. So there was a Wahhabi, Al-Wahhab, Abdullah Wahhab, who had an alliance with Al Saud, and they had formed this Wahhabi Sunni paradigm in Saudi Arabia. So they are in alliance. If you look at Turkey, they are co-opted. The ulema is co-opted by the regime right now. I mean, Western-looking Turkey is now more Islamic in nature. It is more Islamic-oriented. So there, the ulema is trying to legitimize Erdogan's control as the leader of the Ummah, the leader of the Muslim community. So there, it is co-opted. If you look at Egypt, where Al-Azhar is the ulema, the order, so they, along with the Egyptian Republican, because they are looking at themselves as secular Republicans. So what they do is they try to drive off the Muslim Brotherhood. So there again, there is an alliance kind of a thing happening. So that's there. Iran's case is very peculiar, because in Iran, before 1979, there was a different kind of an order. It was a dynastic rule. And after that, to legitimize the rule of Ayatollah, because we all know that they are the followers and they believe in the faith of 12 Islam, 12 Shia Islam. So they feel that along with Prophet Muhammad, they were the most important disciples, or the most important people were the Imams, 11 Imams. And the 12th Imam, which is Imam Mahdi, he's in occultation. And he will resurrect. So when he will resurrect, whenever he resurrects, until that time, the Ayatollah or a cleric is going to take the place of a supreme leader.
Now, let's look at some of the other players. I mean, we talked about Iran-Israel, which is like the main clash. It's been going on for a long time. But what is the role of the Gulf monarchies? I mean, you said initially they were the core and they were opposed to Israel. But over time, they have softened towards Israel. And now, and for a while, it looked like the Gulf monarchies, Saudi Arabia, especially UAE, these two saw Iran as the main adversary. Right, at one point in time. They were talking about the Shia crescent and the threat of the Shia domination and all, Sunni Shia. But then also, if you see the last 5 years or so, they have also patched up. And China helped to bring about a major rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And so on one hand, they are close to Israel, but on the other hand, they don't want to antagonize Iran. So let's talk about especially Saudi and UAE. These two biggies among the Gulf countries, Mohammed bin Salman, Mohammed bin Zayed. What are they looking at when they see this region in strife and turmoil? They want stability, probably, but then how do they decide between Iran and Israel, for example, which is the major clash, and they seem to be caught in between?
Saudi Arabia and UAE, they are looking at the stability of the region and they are looking at their own visions, Vision 2030 and Vision 2071. So they are focusing on those. So for them, because they already know that the oil economy, the rentier state economy that they have, it is not sustainable. At one point in time, they will have to revamp themselves. So they are diversifying their economy, the oil-based economy. So they are looking at those aspects. They are looking at technology. They are looking at modernization. So for them, the stability of the region, hence, is very much important. And therefore, a kind of normalization with Israel, and along with not being very in contestation with Iran, is something that is important. So even the normalization, even if it is a fractured normalization between Saudi Arabia and Iran, it works because they both, and the second thing is that they are looking at international actors. When we talk about the international, they are looking at a post-US order as well, in the sense, after US or even with US, which are the other international actors with whom we can align with. So in that context, let's take the case of China. So China is investing in Iran. China is also investing in Saudi Arabia. China is also supplying weapons and drones and technologies to Saudi Arabia. So that's where the normalization becomes important, because economics is important. So they are looking from the economic perspective. So for that, stability in the region is most important. So that is their idea.
So the pragmatic, and they're successful. I mean, they don't even have a big legitimacy issue because the regimes are able to survive despite being monarchies. Let's talk about two more radical actors there who are often aligned with Iran or are anti-Israeli. One is Turkey and the other is Qatar. These two have, historically for the last many decades, taken a position which is more in favor of Islamist causes. And you already mentioned Turkey's shift from the secular Western orientation to an Islamist under Erdogan. Now, what is in it for them? Like, they have themselves been involved in wars. I mean, especially Turkey. The Syrian war, as you said, was right next door, and they facilitated a lot of the terrorist attacks inside the ISIS problem, and all started from Turkey, right? So, what is their role in this, snowballing crisis that we are seeing, or perpetual crisis, and what do they want? We were saying Gulf monarchies wants peace and stability, but what do Turkey and Qatar want?
So I'll talk about Turkey first. Turkey, if you look at it, Turkey, again, it has, it has not formalized it, but there are indications that it is calling for a neo-Ottomanism that is there. And under Erdogan, they want to establish an Islamic caliphate wherein he will be the caliph. So that's the idea, because then he will be a political leader as well as a religious leader. That's the idea. That's how he positions himself in front of the Ummah. So if that is there, then it is in contrast with Saudi thought process. Because at one point in time, when the Ottoman Empire was existing, right now the guardians of Makkah and Medina are Saudi. But at that point in time, it had come under the guardianship of the Ottoman rulers. So there is a contrast. And Saudi Arabia does not want that kind of a contrast in the region. So now with Erdogan, when he came to power, at that point in time, first things first, what he did was, because he was just developing himself, he had a foreign policy which meant that there will be zero problems with the neighbors. Then he changed his foreign policy to zero-sum approach, wherein when the Arab Spring or the Arab Uprising happened, he was filling on the vacuum. And then again, there's a strategic hedging. Today, after 2021, after the COVID, and after there has been a lot of disruption, and its economy is in the slump, it has reoriented itself, and now it is trying to strategize itself through hedging policies, wherein at one level it is friendlier with these states whenever trade and economy is concerned. But on the other hand, when the ideological concepts are talked about, that's where it is in contrast with the region, whether it is with Saudi Arabia, whether it is with Iran, whether it is with Israel. So with everyone. So that is one.
So, and Qatar as well. Qatar has got a similar
they have an alliance. If Turkey is closer to any of the regional actors in the region, then it is Qatar. So there's an alliance happening over there, and they are trying to rebuild themselves as the emerging regional powers, because traditional order, it was only Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Israel. Now it is about these two along with UAE coming up.
Yeah,
so that's the
more ambition means more tussle, and let's talk a bit about the external players now. US historically has been huge presence. They've got military bases in a lot of the Gulf monarchies, closest ally of Israel, and not at all neutral in any sense. Very much historically opposed to Iran and its proxies in the region. The US role always is controversial in the region. Everybody talks about it. Whether it is an open hand or a hidden hand, there's always a US role. But then Russia also came in during the Syrian crisis of the last 15 years and tried to position muscle in using air force and military power to become a player. And China, you already mentioned, is an economic player. Let's talk about US, Russia, China briefly. What they are doing in the region. Are they fueling further instability and chaos, you think? Or are they helpful to try and stabilize and reduce these tensions?
Because there is a lot of vacuum created, like I mentioned earlier also, that there's a regional security complex. There are many vacuums that these international actors are trying to fill in. So at one level, of course, sometimes they are working as a destabilized actors, and sometimes they're trying to stabilize. With America, like you rightly pointed out, that it has many bases, 30 bases in and around the entire Middle East, in 10 countries almost. So that is the kind of investment that America has. And what America did was, which none of the countries, if you look at it, none of the external actors have been able to do it, that it reduced its dependence on the region. So it doesn't import.
It doesn't need the oil anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't import from the region. So that way it has a more security. It is providing a more, security pivot is the answer of US when it comes to the Middle East. With Russia, like you pointed out, that it does not want a pro-Western, pro-US kind of an order. So it is trying to fill in the gap in that context. Like in Syria, in Libya, in Iraq, in all these places, Russia is coming in and it has few bases, not formalized, but few military bases are already there. With China, it has economy in mind. And because of the economics, they are aligning with everybody. So again, a strategic hedging kind of a scenario.
Right. So Dr. Singh, we have so far spoken about the core players in the region, also the external ones. India, let's come to our country. We have huge stakes there. We have very large, almost 10 million or so expatriates working in the Gulf countries. We have massive trade and economic relationships now, especially with the UAE and Saudi Arabia. And we also have strategic partnership with Israel and with Iran. So given that the region is in flames, what are our concerns, and what is our position really on these relentless wars that we are seeing, and why have we taken that position, and going forward, what role can we play in that region?
So with West Asia, what we have done is we have had and it has worked for us. We have had a non-prescriptive and a non-interventionist policy. So we do not interfere in the internal affairs of the countries. And at the same time, when there is a stance required, we try to balance in the sense that if you look at Israel-Palestine, we have been a traditional supporter of Palestinian cause, and we do talk about a two-state solution. But on the other hand, Israel is a strategic partner for us. It is an important country for us. Similarly, with Saudi Arabia and Iran, the same thing. Saudi Arabia is important for us because of the oil, because of other aspects. Expatriates, like you pointed out, in the Gulf itself, they're like 10 million, 9.5 to 10 million population. So those aspects are important. And on the other hand, Iran is important for us in terms of connectivity. It has been important. Chaulia port, the connectivity towards.
And we also import oil from a number of these countries.
Yes. Iran, we stopped after 2019 because of the exclusion of or imposition of waivers of US. But before that, we were importing oil from Iran. And like I said, it has worked for us. So far, so good. So that's why we do not want to take positions so far. But there will be a point that probably we'll have to take positions, solid positions. But I think that's the reason why we are looking forward to the stability of the region. Once this transition goes on, once this transition is over, a stable Middle East is formed, a new reset is done, probably that's where we play our cards. So
right.
That's what
yeah, I mean, we are not a central player in the drama there, but we have huge stakes there. So therefore, our footprint has been increasing there in that region, especially through these connectivity and the trade deals we are doing with the Gulf monarchies. But like you say, we are not at the table bringing all the players and creating peace there, and we don't have that leverage like the US has, for example, right? So clearly there is a difference, but at the same time our interests are at stake. So I'm sure Prime Minister Modi has, of course, viewers, you will remember, given a clarion call in the context of another war going on in Europe. He said this is not the era of war, and our preference has historically been that war is not a solution to political differences and disputes. So we would want, the guns to fall silent and the bombs to stop. But at the same time, we are not in a position to really dictate terms to any of the players there. So we will, I think, keep our lines open. I want to thank Dr. Manjari Singh for sharing, a complex picture of so many actors out there. This multipolar order that you said. Now you said the order is changing. So we will have to look out for what this new order is going to be. Is it going to be an Israeli-dominated order that is emerging? And will it be accepted by the Arabs and the Persians or not? And what happens to a weakened Iran? And all these things are, up in the air. There's a lot of uncertainty. But what we know is that from the Indian point of view, is that this region cannot be neglected. And we cannot afford to think of it as not my cup of tea, right? So we'll have to be more proactive and involved going forward, don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at it, Israeli order, exclusive Israeli order will never be accepted because the region is predominantly Muslim, Islamic. So it will have to be an alliance, and the alliance will be of the Arabs and the Israelis. The normalizations.
And there are, ideas like Indo-Abrahamic alliance where India is also involved. Let's see. Interesting times. I want to thank you, Dr. Singh, for sharing valuable insights. Thank you so much. Viewers, the West Asia or the Middle East is not a pretty picture. It is not for faint-hearted. And we are seeing spirals of violence and warfare, the likes of which has not happened in decades. So, there is a problem of terrorism, there is a problem of religious extremism, but there is also the classic contestation based on realpolitik among many ambitious countries in the region who have got foreign backers from outside. How this will all transform into a cooperative order, we will have to wait and see, because there are no easy answers. But let's keep our eye on this region, which has been a hotbed for a long time and which will continue to be a source of concern for global security. Thank you for watching. I'll see you again next time. Until then, take care.